with the principal objective of livelihood and profit, close quote. But under the new law, a person is engaged in the business of selling firearms if they do so, quote, to predominantly earn a profit, unquote. In finalizing this new rule, ATF has adhered to its directive from Congress and has ensured that ATF regulations are consistent with the definitions we updated through this historic legislation that makes Americans safer. Importantly, the new definition and the new rule ensure that more gun sales, including those at gun shows or through the internet, include a background check, a life-saving tool that keeps guns out of dangerous hands. These changes are the only significant expansion of the federal background check system since it was established in the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act in 1993. The Department of Justice estimates that there are over 20,000 unlicensed sellers who are taking advantage of ambiguity in the law and who will now have to obtain a license and conduct background checks. Yesterday, in a related hearing, Republicans argued that this new rule is being used to target individuals who are merely selling a gun from their personal collection or who occasionally buy and sell guns as part of a hobby. This is false. The rule, quote, expressly recognizes that individuals who purchase firearms for the enhancement of a personal collection or a legitimate lobby are permitted by the Gun Control Act to occasionally buy and sell firearms for those purposes or occasionally resell to a licensee or to a family member for lawful purposes without the need to obtain a license, close quote. The final rule also states that, quote, nothing in this rule shall be construed as precluding a person from lawfully acquiring a firearm for self-protection or other lawful personal use, close quote. The law and the rule do not impose any new requirements on those who are merely selling a firearm to a neighbor, a friend, or family member, or those who collect and occasionally sell firearms as part of their hobby. Rather than targeting innocent lobbyist sellers, this rule will prevent illegal gun sellers from profiting off gun trafficking. This comes at a critical time, given that the ATF's National Firearms Commerce and Trafficking Assessment revealed that unlicensed gun sales were contributing more and more to the flow of firearms into the black market and, unsurprisingly, becoming a leading source of crime guns. The second new development since we last heard from ATF Director Dettelbach is that Republicans used their control of the House to enact significant cuts to several critical law enforcement agencies, including the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the ATF. We knew this was coming because Republicans have been forthright in their determination to defund, intimidate, and hamstring the agency so that it can no longer effectively do its job and protect Americans from violent crime. Republicans' own messaging documents actually celebrate the 7% cut to the ATF, the law enforcement agency responsible for protecting communities from gun violence, stopping gun trafficking, and ensuring lawful and responsible gun ownership. This brings me to what is still as true today as it was over a year ago when we last conducted an oversight hearing of the ATF. ATF is still the primary federal agency tasked with keeping guns out of the wrong hands, and it is still doing that important work even with the budget cuts forced through by House Republicans. ATF is still providing vital resources that help state and local law enforcement solve crimes and prevent gun violence. ATF is still the only agency in the country that is able to trace crime guns, helping law enforcement determine how a gun came to be owned and used in a violent crime. ATF is also still the only agency that provides local, state, tribal, and federal law enforcement with ballistic imaging analysis, a critical tool that can help solve crime and prevent further gun violence. It provides its assistance at no cost to its law enforcement partners. Despite the significant value that ATF provides to state and local law enforcement, Republicans have defunded the agency, and they repeatedly seek to unravel its regulations through litigation, Congressional Review Act resolutions, and frivolous investigations, even when ATF is merely following the law as directed by Congress. Some Republicans have even introduced a bill to abolish the ATF altogether. The majority says that it stands with law enforcement. So why does it seek to abolish the only law enforcement agency with its capability of tracing crime guns? The majority says that they support state and local police. So why do they attempt to starve the agency that provides state and local police officers with so many critical resources for solving crime, including homicides, gun trafficking, and organized crime? And why do they oppose common sense protections like background checks and red flag laws favored by state and local police agencies nationwide? The answer lies in another part of ATF's responsibilities, making sure that gun dealers follow the law by conducting background checks, refusing to sell to those who are not allowed to have firearms, and keeping records so that crime guns can be traced. The overwhelming majority of gun sellers have no problem following these laws. But when gun dealers willfully refuse to follow them, it is ATF's responsibility to revoke their license to sell. Republicans' priorities are clear. They would prefer to keep every gun store in the country open, even those that willfully violate the law, rather than to let ATF save lives simply by enforcing the law. And this brings me to the final thing that is still the same since our last oversight hearing. It is still the case that we're losing more than 100 Americans to gun violence every single day. Even without counting suicides, we have already lost more than 6,000 Americans to shootings so far this year. That includes 88 young children, 454 teens, and 30 law enforcement officers who were killed by gunfire just this year. Democrats have put forth a range of solutions to prevent gun violence, to support law enforcement, and to solve crimes. But since they took control of the House, our Republican colleagues have not advanced a single bill that would make Americans safer from gun violence. Instead, they have continued to push for unfettered access to assault weapons, concealable rifles, and ghost guns, and to abolish the very agency tasked with preventing gun crimes. As Republicans continue to seek freedom from gun regulations, we will continue to see communities free from gun violence. Director Dettelbach, thank you for appearing here today to talk about the important work that the ATF does to keep Americans safe. I look forward to your testimony, and I yield back the balance of my time. How would that affect public safety, particularly gun violence in this country?
Protecting Americans from violent crime, including firearms violence, was, is, and will always continue to be ATF's top priority. And we work in partnership with state and local law enforcement officials to do that. We investigate the most dangerous, worst of the worst, the people who are out there, trigger pullers, terrorizing our communities. And as I said in my opening statement, the results speak for themselves. Working with our state and local partners, we do a dangerous job, we do it well, and we catch a lot of very violent people. The tools we make available to local law enforcement, the crime gun intelligence, which enables them to identify who those people are better than ever before, so we can focus limited law enforcement resources on catching them, is working. It is driving down violent crime in our cities. That's why everywhere I go in the country, Congressman, everywhere I go, red state, blue state, city, rural, they ask for more ATF resources.
But if the Republicans were to succeed in their effort to abolish the ATF, how would that affect public safety?
Well, all of that would go away.
Okay.
All of that would go away. Our state and local partners who are asking for more ATF, they would be robbed of any ATF. All the cases that we do, all the gangs we prosecute, the RICOs, the VICARs, the cartel cases, all the things we do would disappear.
Thank you. While some House Republicans have sought to abolish the ATF, others have sought to defund it or to reduce its effectiveness through dramatic budget cuts. In fact, House Republicans have actually bragged about cutting the ATF by 7% this year. I understand that ATF has done an admirable job despite these budget cuts. For example, the agency has been able to dramatically reduce processing times for certain firearm transfer applications under the National Firearms Act. But can you describe the impact these cuts have had on the agency and how slashing funding for ATF reduces your ability to protect Americans from gun violence?
Yes. ATF is an agency that is not a large agency with an outsized mission, protecting people from violent crime. And we have a very focused, effective strategy to do that. But sometimes less is more. In law enforcement, less is not more. You can't get public safety on the cheap. And the fact of the matter is that pursuant to the cuts passed by Congress, we have canceled already 2 classes of special agents this year. Those are each 24 agent classes. I fear there will be more cancellations moving forward. We have obviously cut people in all job categories, lab technicians who run DNA tests to try to catch mass killers like happened in Goshen, California. We are doing the best with what you give us. We will continue to work to do that. But there's no doubt that the cuts that have been imposed will have a direct impact on public safety and ATF's mission to fight violent crime, no doubt.
Thank you. Last week, we heard a great deal from Republicans about the need to support state and local law enforcement. Can you tell us how ATF works with and supports state and local law enforcement?
There is no better partner in federal law enforcement for state and local police, sheriffs, state police than ATF. We stand shoulder to shoulder with local law enforcement doing the most violent cases that they do. And everywhere I go, as I said, Congressman, every chief I talk to, every sheriff I talk to, it doesn't matter, urban, rural, north, south, Midwest, East Coast, they all say the same thing.
Thank you.
You guys are doing great. Please send more agents.
Can you explain what a ghost gun or personally manufactured firearm is and why such firearms pose a danger to the American public?
ATF's legal responsibility is to implement the laws that Congress passes. Congress passed the Gun Control Act. The Gun Control Act talks about the need for those who are engaged in the business and selling firearms to have a license. It also talks about anything that is, quote, readily convertible to being an operable firearm, falling under the definition of firearm. And so people who are producing kits that they send out so that people can, and they're engaged in the business of doing it. I'm not talking about an individual hobbyist making a firearm for himself at home. That's allowed. But people who are selling these kits for money and saying, oh, you know, this is not readily convertible to being a firearm because it's not put together, we evaluate those, and the rule that we promulgated on privately made firearms addresses that. Congressman, the number of privately made firearms, which are untraceable, unserialized firearms that are used in crimes in a 5-year period went up 1,000, I'm going to say 1,000%, 10 times, by a multiple of 10, year over year. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is felons and violent people, they know they're going to do something bad. They don't want the firearm to be traced to them. It's a cold weapon. It's untraceable, and it's very dangerous in the wrong hands.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a May 22nd letter from Assistant Attorney General Carlos Uriarte to me that explains the risk that unserialized firearms or ghost guns pose to the public, their proliferation among guns found at crime scenes, and the numerous efforts of the Department of Justice to reduce violence caused by ghost guns and other firearms and to promote public safety.
Objection.
I also ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a March 7th Washington Post article titled, House Republicans Want to Defund the Police, which outlines how Republican cuts to the FBI and ATF will harm the important work of state and local law enforcement.
Without objection.
Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Dettelbach, what were you trying to hide? On the raid on March 19th to Mr. Malinowski's house, disabled the doorbell camera, cut electricity to the house, and you didn't wear body cameras. What were you guys trying to hide?
Mr. Chairman, we're not trying to hide things. In fact,
Sure
after
seems like it.
You
guys cut electricity to the house?
After the...
Oh, that's a question.
I'm trying to answer. After the... Okay, if there's no question, that's fine. I'm sorry.
No, that is a question. Did you?
After the incident, we, along with the Little Rock Police, called for an independent investigation being done by the Arkansas State Police and the local prosecutor.
No,
That's not trying to hide anything.
I asked 3 questions. Why'd you put the tape on the doorbell camera? Why'd you cut the lights? And why didn't you wear the body cams? What are you trying to hide?
And Mr. Chairman, the reason that we called for the investigation is we're not trying to hide anything. The reason I'm not going to talk about what's going on in that investigation is to respect its independence and out of fairness. There's a reason for the Department of Justice policy that's existed for so many decades about not commenting on pending matters. It's not fair to people, and it risks the perception that people are trying to influence.
How about this one? Why'd you ignore the rules? Because don't the rules say you should only use a no-knock entrance into a property if it's the only way, if it's the absolute best way to do it. I mean, I could read from Ms. Monaco's directive. Limit the circumstances in which agents may seek to enter a dwelling pursuant to a warrant without complying with the knock and announce rule because of the risk posed to both law enforcement and civilians. So you want to limit this. Why'd you guys do it all in 57 seconds?
Respectfully, with respect to what I said before, is that we are not trying to hide anything. An independent agency is investigating it, and we, pursuant to longstanding policy, are not going to comment.
The Department of Justice has already told us you guys weren't wearing cameras. I'm just asking why.
For the cameras, our body-worn camera policy, I can talk about that. I think I can answer the question without talking about this case.
You can talk about some things relative to the investigation, but not others. We want all the answers to what's going on here.
I will tell you, with respect to the body-worn camera policy, the Department of Justice announced that policy when it was announced, as we have communicated to your staff and you. It was announced that it would be phased implementation. ATF is implementing that policy. We've implemented it in just under a third of our field divisions. We have not received 3 separate requests for program funding from Congress to do so, but we are still doing it. I watched a hearing a couple of weeks ago where your fellow chairman...
Did the Little Rock police officers who accompanied you on this raid, did they wear body cams?
Again, not commenting on this specific case, but in general, the Department of Justice written policy allows local law enforcement on these types of operations, short-term operations, to follow their own guidelines and policies, if they wish, in body-worn cameras. And what I wanted to say is...
Their policy was to wear them. They weren't wearing them that day. We want to know why. Did you tell them not to wear them?
Mr. Chairman, again, it is simply unfair at this point while there's a pending investigation.
That's a simple question. We just want to know why they weren't following the rules. Their rules say wear body cameras. Your rules say wear body cameras. You weren't wearing body cameras. I go back to my original question. What were you trying to hide? We saw the video where you walked up and you put the tape on the doorbell. We know there were no lights to the foyer area. We have Mrs. Malinowski here who can testify to that. And we know you weren't wearing body cameras. What were you hiding?
Again, Mr. Chairman, we're not hiding anything. And with respect to the body-worn camera policy, the people there...
Why on the 12th did you not go and search the home? You were all circled up, ready to go, but a week before, on the 12th of March, you don't go, you go on the 19th. Why'd you decide not to go on the 12th?
Mr. Chairman, these operations, and by the way, we do about 11,000 operations each year. They're very dangerous operations. ATF doesn't do anything that is not dangerous. Well, it's not quite true, but many of them are very, very dangerous. And those operations are handled by people with decades of law enforcement experience. They plan them, they look at things.
Director, you got to admit, this is a little unique. You got a citizen, the highest paid official in the municipal government, Little Rock, Arkansas, making $260,000 a year, running the airport, no criminal background history, nothing, and he's dead at a pre-dawn raid when it sure looks like you could have served this search warrant when he wasn't there, but you decided not to. You decided to wait till he was home when you did it on March 19th. And as a result, Mr. Malinowski is no longer with us.
Well, first of all, let me just say this, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, any time that there's a loss of life, that is a profound incident. And of course, on behalf of just myself, ATF, and all law enforcement, we are very sorry when those things happen. Also, an agent was shot that day, and I'm sure you are sorry that that occurred also.
Of course, all the more reason to follow the no-knock warrant, not to have a no-knock warrant take place and follow the rules.
Mr. Chairman, as somebody who has worked with law enforcement for decades, there's a great temptation when a horrible incident happens to prejudge. Sometimes people even try to use it to advance agendas. The cops who are in the field and the family...
I just want the answers. My time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dettelbach, thank you for your service. Many of my colleagues and I have been strong proponents and supporters of the use of body cameras and funding for those cameras. And so in some ways, it's rather surprising to read that Chairman Jordan recently criticized you, he just did it today, about body cameras and what happened to them, why they were not being worn. But meanwhile, House Republican Appropriations Committee Chair Hal Rogers just last month criticized your budget request for its department-wide emphasis on equipping federal agents with body cameras. Is there anything in response that you would like to say to Chairman Jordan, who supports the use of body cameras, versus Chairman Rogers, who wants to defund the use of body cameras?
Well, it's not my position to get in the middle of two chairs, but I will say this. Anybody, Chairman Jordan or anybody, we've been implementing this policy for several years. Anybody who wants to support it, I welcome to the effort.
And we need to fund it. And let me just move on, because there's been allegations that this gentleman who the chairman just discussed, Mr. Malinowski, suggesting that he was just a hobbyist. You know, we call him an unlicensed gun dealer, but they say he was a hobbyist and a firearms enthusiast. In your opinion, is someone who buys and then almost immediately resells at least 150 firearms over a 3-year period a hobbyist or an unlicensed gun dealer? Are they a hobbyist or unlicensed gun dealer?
My opinion and your opinion and others' opinions are not what counts. What counts is the federal judge's opinion, who reviewed the search warrant affidavit here and found probable cause that 2 separate federal laws had been violated relating to unlawful firearms acquisition and dealing. And in that affidavit, which is public, some of the things that are set forth are that Mr. Malinowski had not obtained a license, that he obtained about 150 firearms in the period prior to this incident, that he sold a good number of them, some 1 day after he had obtained them, that one of those firearms was found on the person of a 15-year-old Norteño gang member in California. Another was sold in the backseat of a car in Little Rock to a convicted robber. Others were found on a drug dealer in California, a kilo of marijuana, other drugs in the back, baggy scales consistent with distribution. And so, respectfully, these are not victimless crimes, and it is up to Congress and the judge to make that determination. Those agents were present pursuant to the terms of a federally judicially approved warrant. The time they were there was approved. The day they were there was approved.
Let me ask you this. Do you have any idea how many unlicensed gun dealers, just like Mr. Malinowski, are operating in this country, selling multiple tens of hundreds of firearms yearly?
I don't. We can get back to you with we recently published a national firearms trafficking report that talked about the fact that the percentage of people who are trafficking in this manner has now grown to be the #1 way that people are unlawfully dealing firearms. So 40% of all our criminal trafficking cases deal with the notion of people engaged in the business of dealing without a license. That has grown over time.
Okay, let me get this question in. You know, prior to your confirmation in 2022, there had been a 7-year lapse between confirmed ATF directors to the time when you were confirmed. And during that 7-year period, the crime rate and violent crime rate in the country went up and was going up. And then COVID hit, which caused it to recede for a second. And then you were appointed. It's not a mere coincidence, is it, that your appointment and confirmation has resulted in a decrease in crime, in violent crime?
To me, it's the men and women out in the field who are doing the work. I have the privilege to lead them, and I give all the credit to the brave ATF agents and police officers who are out there risking their lives. But thank you for for saying this, but it really is them who's doing the work.
Well, without leadership, it's hard to get things done, and I thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Texas recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe with us today, Ms. Malinowski, if you're out there, would you?